Move, don't breathe. If you scream, they will find you first. I'm already found, she snapped back, voice raw with panic. I woke up with someone else's ash on my throat, so tell me, stranger, which part of this night looks safe to you. Show me your neck. Touch me and I will bite. A pause, a breath close enough to feel on her skin. The room smelled like rain trapped in stone, and then the stranger's tone dropped into something colder, sharper, like a blade laid flat. Bite me if it keeps you alive. Now lift your hair. Veyra's fingers trembled as they slid behind her ear. The moment the hair moved, the air seemed to change. The mark was not ink, not bruise, not any brand she knew. It looked like a smear of pale ash shaped into a crescent, like the ghost of a bite that had never happened. She had been alone. She had locked her door. She had slept with a warded charm under her pillow the way she had been taught as a child. And yet the ash was there. You see it, she whispered. I see it. The stranger sounded almost annoyed, like he had been forced to confirm something he hated. How long? I just woke up, she swallowed. The ash crescent seemed to tighten around her pulse. I tried to wash it off, and the water hissed. Shame and fear tangled in her throat, like it was acid. The stranger's breath stopped. For a heartbeat, the only sound was Veyra's own pulse and the faint tick of the old window frame. Then came a sharp rap against glass. Tap, tap, tap. Veyra's head snapped toward the window. Another tap. Insistent, impatient. A raven clung to the sill in the stormdark, its feathers slick with wet. Around its leg was a strip of paper tied with thin twine. Her stomach dropped so hard it felt like falling through a floor that was not there. The stranger moved first, swift and silent, and yanked the window open a fraction. The raven shoved the note through with its beak like it had been trained to do it. Then it croaked, a sound that seemed too human to be a bird's, and launched itself into the night. The stranger unfolded the paper. He read it once, and something in his posture changed, like a door locking. He held it out. Veyra's eyes traced 3 words, written with steady cruelty. You are next. For a moment she could not breathe. The room pressed in. Every shadow looked like it had hands. Below, somewhere in the street, a siren began to wail, long and rising. Another joined it. Then another, until the sound braided into a single scream that filled the district. Veyra moved to the window on instinct, as if seeing would make it less real. Through the rain she caught lantern light, a knot of people, and the glint of a cart being pushed too fast. Someone shouted, "Another Omega, gods, she's dry as paper." The words hit Veyra like a slap. Her knees went weak. "It's back," she whispered. The phrase tasted like old smoke and old grief. "It's back." The stranger's gaze pinned her. "What is?" Veyra's hand went to the charm at her throat before she could stop herself. A simple amulet, dull and plain, the kind nobody looked at twice. She had worn it for so long it felt like part of her skin. A lie made into metal. Her fingers closed around it. The amulet was warm, always warm, as if it drank her heat to keep her quiet. She remembered a woman's hands fastening it when she was small. A voice that had said, gentle as a lullaby, hide, survive. Veyra's jaw clenched. Then she did the one thing she had sworn she would never do in a crowded quarter. She snapped the amulet in half. The break made almost no sound. A tiny crack, a tiny surrender, but the effect was immediate. Air rushed into the room like it had been waiting outside the door. Veyra's scent, long caged and muted, spilled out like ink in water. It was not sweet, not soft. It was midnight and wild leaf, the sharp mineral edge of stone after lightning. It was wrong for an Omega, too bright, too dangerous. On the street below, heads turned, one by one like a tide taking them. A man paused mid-step and looked up, nostrils flaring. A woman carrying bread stiffened, eyes going glassy. 2 youths by a lamp-post stopped arguing and stared as if they had heard a bell only they could hear. Veyra stumbled back from the window. The stranger swore under his breath. You just did the worst possible thing. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice, he said, and then corrected himself, grim. Not tonight. Move, he reached for her wrist, and Veyra reacted like a trapped animal, jerking away, nails scraping skin. The impulse to shift, to let claws and shadow take over, rose like fever. "Don't," he said, softer, and for the first time there was something like warning for her, not threat. "You shift here, you die. They will smell it and tear the building apart to get to you." "They," she spat. His eyes met hers. They were a storm gray that made the dim room feel even darker. "Anyone with a hunger and anyone with orders," he said. "Now, either you come with me or you run alone and hope the city is kinder than it has been all week." "All week," her throat tightened. "How many?" "7," he said. 7 Omegas vanished, and an 8th is being written into someone's ritual, whether she likes it or not." A tremor went through her. The ash crescent on her neck pulsed once, like it agreed. Veyra forced herself to breathe. "Who are you?" His gaze flicked to the broken amulet in her palm, then to her throat. "Caelith Vorun," he said, no pride in it, just a fact that carried weight. She knew the name. Everyone did in a city like Ebonreach, where the law was not written on paper so much as enforced by teeth. The Alpha Warden, iron control, untouchable, rumored to never lose himself, not to rage, not to rut, not to want, as if want were beneath him. Veyra's laugh came out too sharp. "Of course, the city sends its perfect monster." Something almost like annoyance flashed across his face. "If I were a monster, you would already be chained." His eyes dropped again, and Veyra hated how her skin reacted to that simple movement. Hate did not stop instinct. Instinct did not care about her fear. Caelith's voice cut through it. "Put your cloak on, pull the hood low. We are going to the night market." "The night market is full of alphas." "It is full of masks," he corrected, "and noise, and enough scent spice to drown you if you move fast." Veyra hesitated. Another siren screamed, closer. Somewhere below, someone shouted, "I smell her." Veyra's blood turned to ice. Caelith's hand closed around her wrist again. This time his grip was firm enough that she could not pretend she could fight it. She could feel the restraint in him, the deliberate control, and it unnerved her more than brute force would have. "Go," he said. Now they moved. Down narrow stairs slick with damp, out into an alley where rain fell in hard sheets and lanterns painted the puddles gold. The city smelled like wet stone and smoke and bodies pressed together. Veyra's newly freed scent tried to bloom, to announce itself, and she fought it like she fought the urge to breathe when submerged. Caelith guided her with short, precise touches, a palm on her back to turn her, fingers at her elbow to speed her. Never lingering, never claiming, but always there, a line she could not step out of. It should have felt like being handled. Instead, it felt like being shielded by something that refused to admit it was shielding her. They reached the night market at the edge of Ebonreach, where tents huddled like dark mushrooms under strings of light. Music throbbed from drums and cracked bells. People wore masks of bone and velvet and painted wood. Vendors burned scent sticks that turned the air thick with clove and resin. Veyra pushed into the crowd, keeping her hood low. She tried to breathe through her mouth, tried to make herself smaller, tried to be forgettable. The first shout came from behind. "There, that smell!" A wave of attention hit the crowd. Faces turned, eyes widened. Hunger flickered across too many expressions. Veyra's pulse spiked. The shadow in her bones stirred, restless. Her cloak snagged on a stall rope. She yanked free too fast. The fabric slipped, and for one naked second her forearm was exposed to lantern light. A pattern of runes flared under her skin, bright as molten silver. Veyra froze. That was not there yesterday. That was not there when she went to sleep. The runes crawled up toward her shoulder as if they were alive, as if they were searching for a place to settle. Someone gasped nearby. "Moon's script." Veyra's head snapped up. Too late. A hand closed around her wrist. Not rough, not hesitant. Final. Caelith. He had found her again like a storm finds the tallest thing. He did not look at the runes. He looked at her face, and his expression hardened into something that made people step back without knowing why. "You are done running," he said. "You come with me if you want to live." Veyra bared her teeth. "I am not your prey." His gaze flicked to her throat, to the ash crescent. "Then stop smelling like a target," he said, low enough that only she could hear. "And stop wearing a key on your skin." A shiver ran through her that had nothing to do with the rain. Key. That word scraped at something old in her memory, something like a locked door and a child's sob swallowed into silence. Veyra jerked against his grip. She should have been able to slip away. She was small, quick, trained in surviving. The shadow links inside her had slipped bonds before, but Caelith's presence hit her like gravity. Not dominance screamed and obvious, not the crude push of an alpha trying to force her down. Something worse. Control. Quiet certainty. A gaze like a lock clicking shut. Her body hesitated, betrayed by instinct, and that hesitation was enough. He pulled her through the market with the efficiency of someone moving a valuable object through fire. Behind them, the crowd tried to surge. Caelith did not look back. He did not have to. A low sound rolled out of him, barely audible, but it carried the sharp edge of command. The closest bodies recoiled as if they had been struck. They spilled out of the market into a side street where the buildings grew taller and the lamps fewer. The warden's tower rose ahead, black stone cut into severe lines, its upper windows glowing faintly like watchful eyes. Veyra's breath came fast. "I am not going in there." "You are," he said. "They will cage me." "I will not." She gave him a look that could have cut glass. Alphas always say that right before the bars close. Caelith's jaw tightened. "I am not interested in owning you." "Expect me to believe that." "I expect you to believe you will die without shelter," he snapped, "and I do not have time to persuade you gently." At the tower gate, guards stepped forward with halberds etched in silver. Their eyes were sharp, trained, and when they caught Veyra's scent their pupils widened. Then one of them stared at her neck and went pale. "Warden," he said, voice suddenly uncertain. "She has the seal of the Lunar Cage." Veyra's stomach clenched. She had never heard those words spoken aloud. Not in stories, not in warnings, not even in the half-remembered nightmares that sometimes woke her sweating. Lunar Cage. The phrase felt like a hand around her throat. Caelith's gaze cut to the guard. "Lock the outer gate. No one enters without my word." The guard swallowed. "Yes, Warden." They were rushed inside. The gate slammed with a sound that echoed through stone corridors. Veyra tried not to stare. The tower smelled like salt and iron and a faint undertone of ozone, like a storm trapped indoors. It should have felt safe. It felt like stepping into a blade's shadow. Caelith led her to a room with bare stone walls and a single heavy table. He shut the door, then drew a small pouch from his coat and poured a circle of salt onto the floor, the grains scattering in a perfect ring. When he completed it, the air inside the circle thickened. Veyra's skin prickled. She could feel something press against the room from the other side, curious, hungry, listening. "What is that?" she whispered. "A ward," Caelith said. "Salt and storm steel. It keeps certain things out." "Things like shadows," she said before she could stop herself. His eyes narrowed. "Things like whatever left ash on your neck." He moved to the table and dropped a thick folder onto it. Papers slid out, some sealed, some stamped. He opened it. Veyra's breath caught. A photograph. Old, faded at the edges. A child with dark hair and two large eyes standing beside a woman. The child was Veyra. The woman's face was gone, obliterated by ink, as if someone had poured night over her features and let it dry. Veyra's fingers went numb. "Where did you get that?" "It was in my archive," Caelith said. "It should not exist." "That's my past," she whispered. "It was burned." Caelith's gaze stayed on her. "Someone archived your childhood. Someone wanted you cataloged." The room's lamps flickered. A cold breath slid along Veyra's spine. Then a voice whispered from the dark corner where no one stood. "Come home, Veyra." Her blood turned to ice. She knew that voice. Not from yesterday, not from any living person she could name, from behind dreams, from the edge of memory where fear lived like a pet. Veyra's lips parted, soundless. Caelith's hand went to his belt and came back with a knife that gleamed with storm steel, the blade etched with tiny lightning lines. "Show yourself," he said to the shadows, voice flat. The darkness on the wall rippled. It peeled away from stone in long strands like wet silk, then stretched, then split into too many hands, fingers long as worms, reaching toward Veyra. Veyra's body moved before her mind could. She jumped back, but the shadow hands were faster, greedy, almost familiar. Caelith stepped between them. The blade cut. A clean arc. The shadow screamed without sound and tore in half like cloth. From the wound spilled black dust that hit the floor and scattered like ash. Air filled with the sharp scent of blood and burnt rain. Veyra's vision blurred, her pupils narrowed. The world sharpened at the edges. She felt her teeth lengthen, her nails thicken into claws. No, not here, but the beast in her did not care about location. It cared about threat. A low growl rolled out of her, deeper than her voice should be. Shadow crept along her skin like living smoke. Caelith did not attack her. He did something that made her hesitate. He stepped back, hands open, palms visible. "I am not your enemy," he said. Veyra's growl rose. "Everyone says that. And then they lie," he said, blunt. "I am not going to lie to you. You are being hunted. You are marked. And if you leave this tower without a plan, you will be the next body drained like paper." The image hit her, ugly and vivid, and her beast recoiled. Veyra forced herself to inhale. The shift shuddered and held at the edge, claws still there, eyes still sharp. "What do you want from me?" she demanded. Caelith's gaze dropped to the ash crescent again, his voice lowered. "A deal." Veyra's laugh was bitter. "A deal with the warden, that is a sentence." Caelith leaned forward slightly, like a predator considering whether to jump. "The sentence has already been passed. The ritual started before you woke up." "Ritual," she echoed, and hated how the word made her skin crawl. "What ritual?" Caelith spread a map on the table. The city was drawn in careful detail, streets and canals and districts. Red pins dotted it in a pattern. 7. He tapped them one by one, then drew a line through the air, connecting them in an invisible curve. The pattern formed a circle. The center of the circle sat beneath an old temple marked with an ancient symbol. "Lunar Cage," Caelith said. Veyra's stomach twisted. "That is a story." "It is a location," he corrected. "A well under the temple. A place sealed a century ago and forgotten by most. Not forgotten by whoever is taking Omegas." Veyra stared at the center mark until the ink blurred. A memory flashed, sharp and wrong, of cold stone, of hands pulling her toward stairs that went down and down, of her child self biting her own lip to keep from crying out. "I was almost taken there once," she admitted, voice thin. "A long time ago." Caelith's eyes sharpened. "Tell me the truth, Veyra Ashfell." Hearing her full name in his mouth made her flinch. "How do you know my name?" "I know many names," he said, and there was no pride in it, only the burden of it. "But yours is on a list I did not want to believe." Veyra's throat tightened. The beast inside her paced, restless. Caelith's gaze held hers. "Why did you wear a scent damper since childhood?" She hated that he knew, hated that his eyes were too observant, too trained. She looked away. "Because the city isn't kind to Omegas." "That is not enough." Veyra's fingers curled into claws again. She forced them to unclench. "My type is rare," she said, each word a stone. "I can break marks." Silence. Caelith's expression did not change much, but something in the air did, like a storm front shifting. "That is why," he said quietly. Veyra swallowed. "Why what?" "Why they want you," he answered. "Your neck is not just marked, you are being used as a lockpick." The room felt colder. "You said a deal," Veyra reminded him, trying to keep her voice steady. "What kind?" Caelith exhaled slowly. "A temporary bond." Veyra stared at him like he had suggested she jump into the sea with stones in her pockets. "No, it will be a shield bond," he said, as if choosing each word carefully. "Not ownership, not a claim, a protective tie that confuses the hunt. It will make you harder to track and harder to take." "And it will make me yours," she shot back. It will make you harder to kill, he said, and it will make me responsible for that. Veyra's laugh cracked. Responsible. That word sounds noble when an alpha says it. It usually means control. Caelith's gaze flicked to her claws, to the shadow smoke still clinging to her skin. I do not need to control you, he said. You are already fighting yourself. The words hit too close. Veyra opened her mouth to retort. A crash echoed from the corridor beyond the door, then shouts. Warden, intrusion. The tower's wards, usually a low hum in the bones of the building, flickered like a dying flame. Veyra's skin prickled. Caelith's head snapped toward the door. His posture shifted into violence contained. Another sound. A whistle like a breath cut into a blade. The window behind Veyra exploded inward. She threw herself down as a smoky arrow slammed into the stone wall where her head had been, the impact cracking the surface. The arrow's shaft smoldered. Smoke curled off it like it was made of shadow rather than wood. On the metal head was a single engraved letter. Caelith's face went still in a way that was more frightening than rage. Quell, he said, voice like a curse. Veyra's heart hammered. Who is that? Caelith's eyes were hard. Nyxara Quell. The name meant nothing to Veyra, and yet it did. She had heard it in whispers around shelters, in grateful prayers murmured by Omegas who believed in miracles. The savioress. The benefactor. The one who funded safe houses and promised protection. Too kind to be honest, some had said. Too beautiful to be real, others had sighed. Why is she shooting your tower? Veyra demanded. Caelith did not answer directly. Instead he crossed the room and touched the wall beside the door in a pattern. Stone clicked. A panel slid open, revealing a narrow passage and a small platform. A lift, Veyra breathed. Caelith grabbed her hand again. Move. They stepped onto the platform. The panel slid shut behind them. Darkness swallowed the sound of the corridor. The platform dropped. Veyra's stomach lurched. She could feel the tower above, the mass of stone, the ward lines flickering like nerves. How did they get in? She asked, voice shaking. They did not force it, Caelith said. Someone shut the seals down from inside. Cold spread through Veyra, a traitor, or someone with the codes. The lift slowed and opened into a room that smelled like old paper and candle soot. Shelves climbed to the ceiling, packed with scrolls and ledgers, their spines marked with sigils. A single lamp burned low, throwing long shadows. A man waited at a desk, thin and pale, hair tied back, eyes too bright. When he looked up, Veyra felt the strange sensation of being listened to, not just heard. Caelith, the man said, voice soft. You brought her. Caelith's grip tightened slightly. Tharian Meyerveen. The name carried the hush of forbidden libraries. Archive whisper, some called him. A keeper of laws no one admitted existed. Tharian's gaze went to Veyra's throat and lingered. That ash, he murmured. It is not a mark. Veyra's skin prickled. Then what is it? A key, Tharian said. Veyra's breath caught. Caelith's eyes sharpened. Tharian reached beneath his desk and brought out a book with no title. Its cover was plain, almost boring, as if the book was ashamed of itself. He opened it. The pages were blank. He slid it across the desk toward Veyra. Touch it, he said. Veyra hesitated. Her instincts screamed that the book was a mouth, that it wanted her fingers. I don't take orders, she snapped. Caelith's voice cut in. Veyra, now. Something in his tone made her still. Not dominance, not command for its own sake. Urgency. Veyra reached out and pressed 2 fingers to the page. The paper warmed. Ink bled up from nothingness, forming letters in a steady hand as if an invisible scribe had been waiting for her skin. Veyra watched, throat tight, as the sentence appeared. The 8th will open the cage. Her breath stopped. The words were not prophecy. They were instruction. Veyra jerked her hand back, but the page grabbed at her in the most terrifying way, not with fingers but with meaning. Heat flared across her palm. Pain lanced. She gasped and yanked away, cradling her hand. A shallow burn marked her skin in the shape of a crescent, a mirror of the ash on her neck. Tharian's expression twisted with something like regret. It recognizes you. Caelith's voice was low. How long? Tharion looked at him. Hours, not days. Veyra's head snapped up. What does that mean? Means the circle is nearly complete, Tharion said. 7 points have been fed. The 8th is the lock. Once you are placed, the lunar cage opens. Whatever is sealed beneath the temple wakes. Veyra's mouth went dry. And you know this because, Tharion's eyes flickered, because I can read the laws written into marks. Veyra's gaze darted to Caelith. You trust him. I do not trust anyone, Caelith said, but I trust his fear. Tharion swallowed and turned a page of the blank book. It remained blank. Is one countermeasure? No, Veyra said immediately, instinctive. Whatever it is, no. A countermark, Tharion said. Veyra's stomach churned. She backed away from the desk. Absolutely not. I will not be marked. I will not be claimed. I will not wear someone else's permission on my skin. Caelith watched her for a long moment, then spoke with a steady calm that did not match the chaos above them. Then we put it on me. Silence hit the archive like a slap. Tharion blinked. Once. Twice. Warden, that is not done. It will be, Caelith said. Veyra stared at him, thrown off balance by the sheer wrongness of the offer. You would let an Omega mark you. I would let you, he corrected, and the distinction made heat crawl up Veyra's throat. A shield bond, as I said, you break marks, you do not submit to them. That is the point. Veyra's pulse stuttered. Tharion's voice was careful. If you do this incorrectly, you will link your instincts. His will pull yours will pull his. If she panics, he will feel it. If he bleeds, she will taste it in her bones. Veyra's skin prickled. That sounded like a nightmare and a comfort twisted together. Caelith did not flinch. We need to break the rule of the hunt. They are tracking her as prey. If she is bound to me as shield, the scent signature changes. The key becomes harder to hold. And if Nyxara Quell is involved, Tharion murmured, then she will not stop. At the mention of Nyxara's name, Veyra remembered the engraved Q on the arrow and the way Caelith's face had gone still. She is the one who protects Omegas, Veyra said, voice tight. That is what people say. Tharion's eyes were sad. People say many things when they are hungry for hope. Above them, the tower shuddered. A dull boom, then a ripple like magic tearing. Caelith's head turned as if he could see through stone. We cannot stay. Tharion stood, gathering the nameless book and slipping it into a cloth wrap. You must go below the city. There is a place that still holds old oath magic. If you want a bond that cannot be twisted into ownership, you need a vow witnessed by something that hates lies. Veyra's stomach sank. You mean a shrine? I mean the shrine, Tharion said, quiet. The one with the porcelain priestess. Veyra had heard of it. A rumor among the desperate. A place where vows stuck to your soul even when your mind tried to wriggle out. A place alphas avoided because it did not care about rank. Caelith looked at Veyra. Do you want to live? She wanted to say no just to spite him. She wanted to say yes because she was not ready to die on someone else's schedule. I want to live, she said, voice rough, on my terms. Caelith nodded once. Then come. They moved through narrow tunnels beneath the archive, down steps slick with underground damp. The air grew colder. The city above became a muffled drumbeat, distant sirens and far-off shouting like a war happening in someone else's life. As they walked, Veyra kept feeling her sense surge and fall like it was searching for a wall to press against. Caelith walked beside her, close enough that she could feel his heat through fabric, controlled and steady. It was infuriating. It was also, against all logic, calming. You have iron control, she said suddenly, because the silence was making her thoughts louder. Is it true? Caelith's gaze flicked to her. Does it matter? It matters if you are about to tie yourself to an Omega who can drag instinct out of you like teeth from a jaw, she snapped. His mouth tightened. I do not lose myself. Veyra's laugh was soft, bitter. No alpha thinks he will, right before he does. Caelith stopped at a fork where the tunnel split. For a moment he did not move. Then he turned toward her, and in the dim light she saw something in his expression she had not seen yet. Weariness. I am not afraid of you, he said. Veyra's throat tightened unexpectedly. You should be. I am afraid of failing again, he said, and the words fell heavy, like truth slipping out before he could catch it. I am afraid of seeing another Omega vanish while the city praises its saviors and spits on its victims. The rawness of it caught her off guard. She hated that it did. Before she could respond, Caelith started walking again, as if he had revealed too much and needed motion to erase it. They took the left tunnel. Minutes later, the passage widened into an old chamber lit by candles set into niches. The walls were carved with symbols worn smooth by time. The air tasted faintly of salt and milk and something older, like the memory of prayers. At the far end stood a figure in pale robes. Her face was porcelain, not a mask held by strings, not paint, porcelain, seamless, smooth, with delicate cracks like veins. Her eyes were dark hollows that somehow still looked directly at Veyra. Veyra's skin went cold. Her beast flattened inside her, wary. The priestess spoke, voice resonant, neither young nor old. A vow of protection requires truth. Caelith stepped forward. We need a shield bond. The priestess's head tilted. Protection from what? Caelith's gaze stayed forward. A hunt, a ritual, the Lunar Cage. At those words, the candles flickered. A low hum filled the chamber as if the stone itself exhaled. The priestess turned her hollow gaze to Veyra. What are you? Veyra's jaw clenched. An Omega. The priestess did not move. What else? Veyra's nails dug into her palms. A shifter. The priestess's head tilted farther like a bird studying prey. What kind? Veyra tasted metal, shadow links. Something like approval, faint and unsettling, pulsed through the chamber. The priestess turned back to Caelith. What are you? An Alpha, Caelith said. The priestess waited. Caelith's voice tightened. A Warden. The priestess's hollow gaze did not blink. What else? Caelith's hand flexed at his side. For the first time, Veyra saw him hesitate. Then he spoke, and his voice was quiet enough that it felt like it belonged to the stone, not the air. I have seen her before. Veyra's heart lurched. What? Caelith did not look at her. The night of the fire, the one that erased her past, I was there. The chamber seemed to tighten around them. Veyra's breath caught. She saw, in a flash, orange light and choking smoke and the impression of boots on stairs. You, she whispered. The word was not accusation yet. Disbelief turning sharp. Caelith's jaw clenched. I pulled someone from the flames. I thought it was you. Veyra's voice broke. It was. No, he said, and the single syllable carried years of regret. I saved the wrong person. For a heartbeat, Veyra could not speak. She had carried the fire like a scar inside her, a secret she could not show anyone because no one would believe her if she did. And here was the city's untouchable warden admitting he had been there, that his hands had been in the smoke too. The priestess's voice cut through the silence. Truth is offered, now terms. Caelith finally turned to Veyra. His eyes held hers without flinching. This bond will not be ownership, he said. It will not strip your choice. It will not allow me to command you. It will give me one duty, to shield, nothing more unless you choose it. Veyra's throat tightened. No Alpha should sound like that and mean it. It was unnatural, or it was the most dangerous lie she had ever heard. And what do you get? She demanded, because she needed to anchor herself in suspicion. Why do it? Caelith's gaze dropped to her throat, to the ash crescent. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. Because if the Lunar Cage opens, Ebonreach burns, and because I am tired of bodies. Veyra's stomach turned. She remembered the sirens, the shouted words, dry as paper. She looked at the priestess. If I agree, Veyra said carefully, can this bond be broken? The porcelain face turned slightly, and the priestess's voice deepened. It can be ended by mutual release. It cannot be twisted into a leash, but understand this. A shield bond still ties nerves to nerves. You will feel him, he will feel you. Veyra's breath hitched. Feeling an Alpha was a threat. It was also, in the private place she never admitted existed, a temptation. Not the crude, kind people joked about. The kind that whispered, you could stop being alone. Veyra forced her gaze back to Caelith. No commands. No commands, he agreed. No claim bite, she added, and her voice shook at the word bite. Caelith's eyes darkened for half a second, a flash of something instinctive that he leashed immediately. No claim bite, he said, and you let me walk away if I choose, she finished. Caelith's jaw tightened as if that last demand cost him. Then he nodded once. Yes. The priestess lifted her hands. Her sleeves slid back, revealing wrists inked with faint sigils that seemed to move when Veyra blinked. Step into the circle, the priestess said. Salt had been poured into a ring on the floor, finer than Caelith's ward salt, shimmering like ground bone. Veyra stepped in. Caelith stepped in with her. The air inside the circle warmed, then cooled, then warmed again as if the chamber was breathing around them. The priestess spoke words that made Veyra's skin prickle. Old language, vow magic. Speak your terms. Veyra's mouth was dry. She forced her voice steady. I accept a bond that shields, not a bond that owns. Caelith's voice followed, low and controlled. I accept a bond that shields, not a bond that commands. The priestess's hands hovered between them. Seal with truth. Veyra stared at Caelith. The instinctive Omega part of her waited for dominance, for pressure, for the invisible shove that would make her knees want to bend. It did not come. Instead, Caelith's gaze held hers in something like grim respect. Veyra swallowed. I do not trust you, she said, because truth mattered here. I think you could break me if you wanted. I think you have broken people before. Caelith's throat moved. Truth accepted. Veyra's voice trembled. But I believe you want to stop this, and I do not want to be drained like paper. I do not want to open a cage I never asked to be a key for. The circle pulsed, a soft light rising and falling. Caelith spoke, voice rougher than before. I do not know how to be gentle, he said, and the admission sounded like it hurt. I know how to enforce. I know how to contain. I will not contain you. I will shield you, even if you hate me for it. The circle flared. Heat rushed up Veyra's skin like a tide. For a moment she thought she would shift fully right there, claws and shadows spilling out, but the priestess's magic steadied her, held her at the edge like hands on her shoulders. The priestess lowered her hands. Something snapped into place. Not a chain, not a collar. More like a thread tied around a finger, a reminder you could feel even when you tried to forget. Veyra inhaled. And for the first time, she smelled Caelith not as an enemy alpha in the room, but as something connected. Stormwolf, rain, ozone, a deep, steady heat under the sharpness like coals banked in ash. It should have repelled her. Instead, her pulse stumbled, confused, traitorous. Caelith's eyes flicked to her throat as if he could sense the ash crescent reacting. Then the city screamed. Not with sirens, with a sound like a howl dragged across miles. It rolled through the stone, through the tunnels, through the marrow of the world. Veyra's knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of the circle, breath-tearing. Above, she could hear distant cries, a chorus of Omegas caught by something invisible. A call, a pull. The ash crescent on her neck heated, and the runes under her skin answered, flaring in silver pulses. Veyra gasped. It's calling me. Caelith's hand caught her elbow, steadying her without squeezing. Where? Down, Veyra whispered, eyes wide. To the well. The priestess's hollow gaze sharpened. The cage is hungry. Caelith's face went hard. We move. They left the shrine fast, boots splashing through shallow water in the tunnels. Veyra's thoughts skittered. The bond thread between her and Caelith hummed with his focus, his anger, his controlled urgency. She felt it in her bones. It was terrifying. It was also grounding, like holding onto a rope while the world tilted. They emerged into a back street near the temple district. Rain had eased to a fine mist. Lanterns burned low behind fog. The city felt wrong, too quiet in some places, too loud in others. Then they rounded a corner and hit a wall of bodies. A crowd packed the main square, shoulder to shoulder, faces bright with fear and righteous hunger. Torches crackled, smoke rising. People shouted over one another, names and accusations flying like thrown stones. At the front stood a woman in pale silk and a cloak the color of moonlight. Her hair was dark, glossy, and her smile was gentle enough to make people want to kneel. Nyxara Quell. Veyra's stomach dropped. Nyxara's gaze landed on Veyra and warmed like she was seeing a lost child. She stepped forward, hands open. "There you are," Nyxara said, voice carrying easily over the crowd. "My dear girl, you frightened everyone." Veyra's skin crawled at the possessive ease of it. "I am not yours," Veyra said, and her voice shook with fury. Nyxara's smile did not falter. She moved closer, careful, as if approaching a wounded animal. "You are sick with fear," Nyxara murmured, but her eyes flicked to Caelith with a sharpness that did not match her softness. "He has you in his tower, in his wards, in his circles. Of course you think you are free. You have been handled." Caelith stepped forward, his presence cutting like cold air. "Step away." Nyxara turned her attention fully to him, still smiling. "Warden Vorun," she said sweetly. "Ebonreach is tired of your secrets." Behind her, the crowd murmured, faces turning toward Caelith with suspicion. Nyxara lifted her voice. "This man shelters an Omega who reeks of lunar magic," she said, and her tone shifted, just enough to plant a blade. "The same lunar magic found at every disappearance. 7 Omegas gone, 7 families begging, and now the Warden appears with the 8th in his grip." Shouts erupted. "Warden did it. He's hoarding them." "Monster," Veyra's heart hammered. She moved instinctively closer to Caelith, then caught herself, hatred of needing him flaring. Nyxara's gaze returned to Veyra, and her voice softened again, intimate in a way that made Veyra want to scrub her skin raw. "Come to me," Nyxara said. "I will keep you safe. Your mother signed you into my protection. You belong in my care, not his." The words hit Veyra like a punch. "My mother is dead," Veyra said, voice low. Nyxara leaned closer and lowered her voice so only Veyra could hear. "Your mother signed you to me before she burned," Nyxara whispered. "She begged me to take you. She knew what you were." Veyra's vision blurred with sudden fury. "You are lying." Nyxara's smile did not change. "Am I?" Caelith's voice cut in sharp. "Enough." He tried to push through the crowd. The crowd closed. A dozen hands shoved him back. Torches lifted. Fear and anger made people brave in stupid ways. Nyxara lifted one hand, and the crowd stilled as if she held invisible strings. Then a new figure stepped forward from the side, moving with the quiet confidence of someone used to walking into danger. A man in a dark coat, short hair damp with mist, eyes observant, expression tight with something like regret. Urend Vale, beta investigator. The only official in Ebonreach who had ever looked at Veyra as a person instead of a scent. Relief flickered through her, brief and desperate. Urend's gaze met hers for a heartbeat. Then he looked away and faced the crowd. "I have evidence," Urend said, voice steady. "Evidence that Warden Vorun has concealed information about the disappearances." Veyra's breath stopped. Caelith went perfectly still. Nyxara's smile widened, almost imperceptibly, like a trap recognizing the prey is stepping into it. Urend lifted a sealed packet. "Warden Vorun's archive contains records of the lunar seal," Urend continued, "and records of Veyra Ashfell, records that should not exist unless she was being tracked." The crowd roared. Veyra's head snapped toward Caelith. "You said you found it in your archive." Caelith's gaze stayed on Urend, and the bond thread between them trembled with something like shock, then controlled fury. Urend's voice did not waver. "Furthermore," he said, "the Warden failed to report the presence of lunar script on the victim sites. He claims ignorance, yet his own ward logs show fluctuations consistent with lunar magic." Veyra's mouth went dry. Was Urend mistaken, or bought, or forced? Nyxara stepped closer to Caelith, her voice gentle as snow. "Warden," she said, "for the good of the city, you must release her to proper protection and submit yourself for restraint." Caelith's gaze swept the crowd. He could have fought. Veyra could feel it, the storm inside him, held on a leash so tight it trembled. If he cut loose, people would die. Omegas would die too, caught underfoot. He made a decision. Slowly, deliberately, Caelith unbuckled his knife belt and set it on the wet stone. The crowd inhaled as one. Caelith spread his hands slightly. I will not spill blood in this square. Silver chains appeared, carried by guards who looked terrified to be near him. They moved fast, as if afraid he would change his mind. The chains snapped around his wrists. The moment the metal touched his skin, the bond thread between him and Veyra flared. Pain lanced through Veyra's forearm as if the chain had closed around her too. She gasped and stumbled. Caelith's head snapped toward her, eyes darkening. Veyra pressed her hand to her mouth, shocked by the intimacy of it. She could feel his restraint like a muscle shaking under strain. She could taste the metallic edge of his anger as if it was her own. Nyxara stepped to Veyra's side, her touch light on Veyra's elbow. Come, Nyxara murmured. You do not have to feel his violence. I will save you from him. Veyra's entire body wanted to recoil, but the crowd was watching, hungry, judgmental. And if Veyra fought here, if she shifted, if she let her scent spike, the square would turn into a slaughter. She looked at Caelith. He stood straight despite the chains, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on her like he was trying to communicate something without words. Don't. Wait. Live. Veyra's throat tightened. She forced her feet to move. She let Nyxara guide her through the crowd, past torches and faces twisted with fear, past shouted curses and whispered prayers. Behind her, the silver chains rattled. Veyra flinched at each sound because she felt it in her bones. As Nyxara led her away, Veyra glanced back once. Caelith's gaze was on her, not possessive, not pleading, fierce, controlled, like a storm held behind a dam that was starting to crack. Nyxara's voice brushed Veyra's ear, sweet as poison. Good girl, she whispered. You will rest now. You will be safe. And when the city calms, you will remember who truly protects Omegas. Veyra said nothing. But inside, the Shadow Lynx lifted its head, ears flat, and began to memorize Nyxara's sent the way predators memorize prey. Nyxara's carriage waited at the edge of the square, white curtains drawn. Veyra stepped inside, hands clenched, and the door shut behind her with a final click. The bond thread hummed, stretched, and held. Veyra pressed shaking fingers to her throat where ash sat like a promise. Somewhere under the city, a cage called to its key. And somewhere in the square, an alpha in silver chains held back a storm that wanted to tear the world open to reach her. Stop shaking, you are safe now. Veyra's laugh came out thin and sharp. Safe does not lock from the outside. The carriage door had closed with a final click that still echoed in her teeth. White curtains swayed with the motion, diffusing lantern light into something soft and falsely intimate. The upholstery smelled of lavender and expensive soap, a scent meant to calm and to claim. Nyxara sat opposite her with perfect posture, hands folded like a prayer. The pale silk of her sleeves looked untouched by rain. Her eyes, warm and dark, watched Veyra the way a healer watches a fever. You are frightened, Nyxara said. That is normal. You have been under stress. You have been near an alpha who does not understand gentleness. Veyra's fingers curled in her lap. The bond thread pulsed like a stretched nerve, vibrating with distance and pain that was not hers. Every rattle of the carriage wheel sent an echo through that thread, as if Caelith's silver chains were dragging along her bones. You did that, Veyra said quietly. You put him in chains. Nyxara's mouth softened into sympathy. I prevented bloodshed. You saw that crowd. You felt their fear. If he had fought, they would have burned the square. You would have been blamed. You would have died. You made them fear him. Nyxara tilted her head. The city already fears him. I simply gave them a story they could hold. Fear needs a shape. The carriage rolled over cobblestones, then turned. The motion pressed Veyra into the seat. She stared at the curtains and imagined hands behind them. Every time she blinked, she saw the engraved Q on the arrowhead and Caelith's face going still as stone. You said my mother signed me to you, Veyra said, forcing each word steady. Show me. Nyxara's gaze did not flinch. Of course I will, when you are calm, when you have eaten, when your scent stops calling every hungry throat in Ebonreach. My scent is mine, Veyra snapped. Nyxara's smile stayed gentle. Yes, and you do not yet understand what it does to others. That ignorance is not your fault. You were raised wrong. Veyra's stomach turned at how easily Nyxara said it, like Veyra was a misfiled document, like her life was a clerical error. You know what I am, Veyra said. It was not a question. Nyxara's eyes flicked to Veyra's neck, to the ash crescent that still sat there like a cold kiss. I know what you can do. I know what you could become. And I know what the city would do to you if you walked these streets alone with no amulet. The carriage slowed. Veyra felt it through the floor and through the bond thread, the strange double awareness of motion outside and pain inside. She tasted metal at the back of her tongue. What did you do to the tower? Veyra asked. Nyxara's expression went almost affectionate, as if Veyra had finally asked the right question. I asked for what I needed, and people in the tower gave it to me. People do not just give you a warden's codes. Nyxara's fingers smoothed her sleeve. You would be surprised what people give when they are told it is for protection. The carriage stopped. Nyxara leaned toward the window and tapped it once. The curtains parted a fraction, revealing a quiet street lined with tidy houses, all the same height, all painted pale. White drapes in windows. Little lanterns on hooks. It looked like a neighborhood built out of promises. Nyxara opened the carriage door herself. Cool air spilled in, mist smelling of wet stone and garden soil. Come, she said. No one will hurt you here. Veyra stepped down. Her boots met clean flagstones. It was too clean, too quiet. The city's usual pulse felt absent, as if this street had been cut out and stitched back in wrong. A house waited at the end, modest and pretty, with white curtains and a painted door. Nyxara walked as if she owned the air. Veyra followed because she had to, because the crowd had watched, because resisting here in the open would invite pursuit, and because she needed to see what Nyxara was really doing. Inside, warmth embraced them. A fire crackled in a hearth. Candles burned with a soft, steady flame that did not tremble. Veyra's nostrils flared. The air was thick with something sweet, not perfume, something older, herb and resin. A layered scent meant to blur the edges of instinct. Nyxara noticed her reaction and smiled. Scent spice, it keeps the house calm. It keeps the house dull, Veyra murmured. Nyxara's hand rested lightly on Veyra's elbow and guided her down a narrow hallway. Doors sat on both sides, all closed. The floorboards did not creak. The silence felt engineered. At the end was a room with a wide mirror on the far wall. Then Veyra saw there were more mirrors, one on each side wall, one behind, 4 mirrors surrounding a single chair in the center. She stopped. Nyxara released her elbow. Sit, my dear. I do not sit in rooms designed like traps. Nyxara sighed, a sound of patience. You are seeing cages where there are none. This is a reflection chamber. It helps Omegas who have been frightened by Alphas to find their center again. Veyra stared at the mirrors. Her reflection stared back. In the front mirror, the ash crescent on her neck looked darker. In the mirror to the left, it looked like a full ring, a closed circle around her throat. In the mirror to the right, the mark was gone, replaced by faint silver runes crawling up her jawline like vines. In the mirror behind her, the mark was not ash at all, but a bruise shaped like teeth. Veyra's skin went cold. The mirrors were not reflecting her. They were choosing versions of her. Nyxara's voice slid around her, soothing. Mirrors show possibilities, paths, the shapes you might have taken if you had been raised with care, if you had not learned to hate your own nature. Veyra's heartbeat hammered against the ash crescent. The bond thread pulsed, tugging as if warning her. The room smelled wrong, sweet and damp at the edges like flowers laid over rot. What do you want? Veyra said. Nyxara's gaze softened. I want you alive. I want you unafraid. I want you to stop running into the arms of men who will use you. You used me, Veyra snapped. You used the crowd. You used Urend. Nyxara's expression did not crack, but her eyes sharpened at the name. Earned Vale cares about you. That is why he did what he did. Veyra's throat tightened. Do not speak for him. Nyxara stepped closer. She was too close. Her scent brushed Veyra's senses like velvet on skin, not Omega, not Alpha. Something in between, curated, practiced, difficult to pin. You are exhausted, Nyxara said quietly. Your blood is loud. Your instincts are louder. Sit. Drink. Let your body stop fighting for 1 hour. A small table stood beside the chair. On it, a cup of water in a pale ceramic bowl. Veyra's eyes fixed on it. The water looked ordinary, too ordinary. There was a faint sediment at the bottom, a pale dust that clung to the glaze like chalk. Suppressant. She had smelled it once in a shelter, the night a frightened Omega had tried to silence herself and almost stopped breathing instead. Veyra kept her face blank. Water, Nyxara smiled as if pleased. Yes. Drink. Veyra reached for the cup with careful hands, lifted it, and held it near her mouth. She let her shoulders sag slightly, played the role of someone surrendering. Nyxara's relief was immediate, subtle but real, a micro loosening at the corners of her mouth. A softness that said, good, the key is behaving. Veyra tilted the cup, let a drop touch her lower lip, then lowered it again. It tastes like stone, she said, mild. Nyxara's smile remained. The wells here are old, pure. Veyra nodded, then let her wrist tremble as if she was too weak to hold the cup. She tipped it deliberately. The cup slipped from her fingers. It hit the floor and shattered. Water splashed across the boards. Pale dust spread with it like spilled flour. Nyxara did not jump. She did not gasp. She only looked at the wet suppressant blooming across her floor with a sadness that felt rehearsed. Veyra moved in the same instant, fast. Her foot slid on the wet board, but she caught herself, throwing her weight toward the door. Her fingers closed on the handle. It did not turn, locked from the outside, of course. Veyra spun, breath coming quick, and the mirrors flashed different versions of her panic. In one she was crying, in another she was snarling. In a third her eyes were empty, obedient. Nyxara watched her with calm pity. You see, you are not ready to be without guidance. You drugged me. Nyxara's voice stayed gentle. I tried to soothe you. You are too sharp. You cut yourself on your own fear. Veyra's nails dug into her palm. The urge to shift surged, shadow rising, the lynx pacing under skin. She forced it down, then let it rise again, testing the room like a predator tests a fence. The air answered with resistance. Not stone, something else. A pressure, a field. The house was not just locked. It was layered, like a box inside a box inside a box. Veyra's gaze flicked to the window. The curtains moved with no breeze, a faint ripple like water. She lunged. Her shoulder hit glass. It did not break. It did not even rattle. Her body rebounded as if she had slammed into a wall. Pain burst through her collarbone. She hissed and stumbled back. Nyxara's eyes softened. Illusion, my dear. Do not hurt yourself. Veyra stared at the window, sickened. She had felt glass. She had seen outside. But the impact had been against something that behaved like a solid barrier. Small cage disguised as a home. A miniature lunar cage. Nyxara clasped her hands once, a neat little clap that echoed too loud in the quiet room. At the doorway, the wall shimmered, not a hidden door opening, a veil parting. Figures stepped through. 3, then 5, then 8. They wore masks, white and expressionless, tied with black cords. Their bodies moved with the smoothness of shifters who had trained for years, shoulders loose, feet silent. Veyra's stomach clenched. She scented them and tasted something wrong. Not mercenaries, not ordinary guards. Their scents were muted, smothered under layers of resin and salt. But beneath that, faint and frayed, were Omega notes. Not all. Some were beta, some alpha. But too many carried Omega softness under the suppression. Veyra's breath caught. Who are they? My protectors, Nyxara said. They volunteered. They look like they are drowning, Veyra whispered. Nyxara's smile thinned a fraction, the first hint of impatience. Do not romanticize suffering. They are safe with me. the masked guards did not advance. They began to sing. A low melody, wordless, vibrating in the bones. It was not beautiful, it was functional, like a tool. The notes pressed into Veyra's instincts, pushing down, pushing inward, trying to fold her into quiet. Her knees went weak. The lynx inside her snarled and then faltered, as if someone had thrown a net over it. Veyra swallowed hard. Her throat tightened. Her eyes watered with sudden, involuntary pressure. She dropped to one knee. Nyxara stepped closer, her voice soft and coaxing over the song. There, rest. Let the city stop hunting you. Let the bond stop pulling you into danger. Let me carry the weight. The bond thread pulsed like a warning bell. Even at distance, it tugged, vibrating with Caelith's contained fury, his pain, his refusal to break. He was alive, still held, still restrained, still not coming, because he could not. Veyra's jaw clenched until it hurt. Her teeth scraped her lip. The taste of blood snapped her focus for half a heartbeat. Blood. Old vow magic responded to blood. Tharian's words returned like a knife sliding into a seam. Laws written into marks, laws read and rewritten. Veyra lowered her gaze, letting Nyxara believe the song was winning. Then she bit the inside of her own palm. Pain flared clean and sharp. Warm blood welled. The guard's song pressed down harder, but Veyra used the pain as an anchor and dragged her bleeding hand across the floor. She drew a line. Then another. A simple anti-rune, the kind her foster guardian had once shown her in a panic and then sworn her never to use. Not because it was forbidden, because it worked. The blood line darkened. It drank the candlelight. For 1 second, the room's warmth shivered. The mirrors flickered. Nyxara's eyes widened a fraction. Stop. Veyra finished the final stroke. The air cracked like ice. The illusion of calm split open. The fire in the hearth went out in a hiss, leaving only smoke. The sweet scent spice collapsed into a harsh mineral stench. The candles guttered, flames turning thin and blue. The white curtains sagged, revealing stained fabric beneath, and the house shifted, not physically moving but revealing itself like a mask removed. Veyra saw the floorboards were not ordinary wood. They were laid over stone. Old stone, carved with runes. A circular pattern beneath the room, faint but undeniable, like the ghost of a diagram. Veyra's breath hitched. She looked down and felt it in her bones. Below them was a hollow space. A well. Nyxara's expression went very still. Her kindness did not vanish. It sharpened, becoming something precise, predatory, honest for the first time. You should not have done that, Nyxara said softly. Veyra pushed herself to her feet. Blood dripped from her palm, warm and real. You put suppressant in my water. You called this protection. Nyxara's gaze dropped to the anti-rune and then back to Veyra's face. You think you have won? You have only opened your eyes. The cage was never meant to be invisible to you. Veyra's skin went cold. You wanted me to see it. Nyxara stepped closer, and the masked guards shifted with her like shadows, not threatening yet, but ready. I wanted you to understand, Nyxara murmured. You are the 8th point, the key. A city can scream or a city can sing. I prefer singing. Veyra's voice shook with fury. 7 Omegas are gone. Nyxara's expression softened into something almost tender. 7 Omegas were taken from suffering. 7 lives redirected from cruelty. You think death is the worst thing that can happen to an Omega in Ebonreach. You have no idea how creative men become when they are bored. Veyra's stomach turned. Do not pretend you did it for mercy. Nyxara's eyes flashed, and for a heartbeat the mask of savior slipped. Mercy is irrelevant. Freedom is the only currency that matters. Freedom, Veyra spat. In a cage, Nyxara's smile returned, calm again. Cages can be doors if you hold the key. Veyra's hand went to her neck. The ash crescent pulsed faintly, warmed by her anger, by her blood, by the revealed circle underfoot. What is under us? Veyra demanded. Nyxara's gaze turned almost reverent. An old source. Older than the current laws. Older than the wardens. The city built temples over it and called it holy so no one would look too closely. The Lunar Cage was not made to keep something in. It was made to keep everyone out. Veyra swallowed. What is inside? Nyxara's voice dropped, intimate. An alpha source, a hunger, a beginning. The first storm that ever learned to want. The bond thread snapped taut in Veyra's awareness at the word storm. Caelith sent memory rose in her mind, rain and ozone and heat, and she hated how her body reacted even now, in this poisoned room, as if the bond had made him a reference point for safety. Nyxara watched her reaction and smiled, pleased. Yes, you feel it, the call. It is already tasting you. The masked guards stepped forward at last. They did not strike. They did not grab with brute force. They reached as if they were sleepwalking, hands out, gentle, deadened, and that was worse. Veyra backed away, eyes darting. The anti-rune on the floor still held a crack in the illusion, but it did not break the cage entirely. It had only revealed the truth. She needed a message out. Caelith. The bond thread hummed, but it could not send words. Yet it could send sensation. She had to leave a physical sign too, something that could be found if someone searched, something that could guide. As the guards closed in, Veyra turned as if to flee toward the hallway, then dropped low and dragged her nails across the wall near the doorframe. Plaster tore under her claws. She carved a mark. A slanted crescent with 3 lines, not a rune, a hunter's sign. A shadow link sign. She poured intent into it, thinking of Caelith, of storm wolf eyes, of the feel of his restraint like a steady hand on the back of her neck. Find me. The bond thread pulsed once in response, as if it had heard. 2 guards took her arms, not rough but unyielding. Their grips were wrong, too controlled, like puppets held by strings. Veyra leaned toward the nearest and breathed in, searching for any hint of self beneath the suppression. For a second she caught it faint. Fear. A woman's fear. A familiar Omega note, cracked like old porcelain. Veyra's throat tightened. Do you know who you are? She whispered. The masked guard's head twitched, as if hearing something far away. Her fingers tightened, then loosened. Nyxara's voice snapped, quiet but cutting. Do not poison them with questions. The guard's grip returned to perfect compliance. Veyra's stomach dropped. They were not volunteers. They were bound. Nyxara moved ahead as the guards guided Veyra down the hallway. Doors on either side remained closed, but Veyra heard things behind them. A soft scrape like nails on wood, a breath. A whimper swallowed quickly. Her skin crawled. Nyxara paused at the end of the corridor and pressed her palm to the wall. Stone shifted. A hidden door slid open. Cold air rolled out, damp and mineral, carrying the faint smell of old salt and something like burnt rain. A stairway descended into darkness. Veyra's heart hammered. The ash crescent heated, responding, thrilled and terrified. The runes under her skin stirred like waking insects. Nyxara turned and looked at Veyra as if she were a guest being shown a private garden. You will not be harmed, Nyxara said. Not by me. Veyra met her gaze. You are already harming me. Nyxara's smile did not waver. I am using what you are. That is not harm, that is purpose. They guided her down. The steps were stone and worn, as if many feet had walked them over decades. The air grew colder with each step. The sound of the singing guards faded, replaced by a deep hush that seemed to press against Veyra's eardrums. At the bottom, the passage opened into a wide chamber lit by bone-colored candles set in a circle. The flames were low, thick, steady, burning without smoke. Runes crawled across the floor in a large ring that matched the pattern Veyra had seen on Caelith's map. 7 points around the circle, empty spaces, where something had been placed and removed. Names were carved into the walls. Not painted. Carved from the inside as if the stone had been cut outward by fingertips. Veyra stepped closer, dragged by a terrible curiosity. She read a name and her stomach lurched. A shelter list. A name she had heard called once in a soup line the night a girl did not return. Another name, another. 7. The missing Omegas were not just gone, they were here, or some part of them was. Veyra's mouth went dry. They were used. Nyxara stood beside her, almost serene. They were anchors, soft points. The city does not notice when soft things disappear. That is why the world is built the way it is. Veyra's voice shook. You call yourself a savior. Nyxara's eyes slid toward the center of the chamber where a circular stone well yawned open, its rim etched with moon script. I am saving what comes after. Veyra stared into the well. Darkness looked back. Not empty darkness. Pressure darkness. As if an ocean sat beneath the stone and waited for a crack. The ash crescent on her neck pulsed, and the runes under her skin answered. A silver glow rose in waves, synchronized with the candle flames. The chamber seemed to inhale. Veyra heard whispers, not in her ears, in her bones. Do not open, do not please. The voices were faint, frayed, but unmistakably Omega, layered with fear and pleading. Veyra's knees weakened. She swallowed hard. Nyxara's hand rested lightly on Veyra's shoulder, almost affectionate. They are not suffering. They are part of the circle now. Their fear is only the last echo. You did not free them, Veyra said, voice hoarse. You trapped them. Nyxara's grip tightened a fraction. I gave them meaning. Veyra's beast snarled inside her. Shadow flickered at her fingertips, trying to spill, but the chamber's pressure pushed it back. Lunar magic did not fear shadow. It fed on it. Nyxara stepped away and lifted her arms slightly. The masked guards arranged themselves at the circle points like dancers taking marks. Their song began again, low and heavy, vibrating in the stones. The runes on Veyra's skin flared bright. Pain lanced up her neck, down her spine. It felt like being pulled from the inside, as if invisible hooks had sunk into her marrow. Veyra gasped and stumbled toward the center without moving her feet, dragged by magic. Nyxara's voice rose, no longer gentle, now ceremonial, carrying authority that filled the chamber. 7 given, she said. 7 etched, 7 fed. 8th arrives. Veyra's lips parted, breath trembling. Stop. Nyxara's eyes gleamed. You cannot stop what you are. The bond thread surged, vibrating hard enough to make Veyra's teeth ache. Caelith. Somewhere he was moving. She could feel it, not footsteps. Will, a storm pressing against restraint. Veyra clung to it the way a drowning person clings to driftwood, even as she hated herself for needing it. Nyxara walked to the edge of the well and looked down as if greeting an old friend. Wake, she whispered. The well answered with a deep vibration that made the candle flames bow inward. Veyra's runes brightened, and a thin line of blood welled along the silver paths under her skin, as if the magic had found her veins and decided they were ink. She cried out, then choked the sound down. She would not give Nyxara the satisfaction of hearing her break. Nyxara turned back to her. Do you understand now? The mirrors, the calm, the suppression. Those were kindness. I tried to bring you here gently so you would not tear yourself apart fighting your own nature. Veyra's voice came out in a rasp. You are not kind. Nyxara's expression softened in something like sorrow. Kindness is a costume. I wear it because the world listens to it. Veyra's fingers trembled. Blood slid down her palm again where she had bitten herself. She looked at it and remembered the book in Tharian's archive, the way the blank page had recognized her, the way it had burned her. Recognized. Laws. If laws were written into marks, then marks could be rewritten. Veyra forced herself to breathe slowly, in time with the bond thread, in time with the pressure under the well. She closed her eyes and found the rune pattern on her skin in her mind, the way you find a knot by touch in darkness. She saw the crescent and the lines branching from it. Key. She imagined fingers pinching the key's teeth and snapping them off. A surge of pain hit her so hard her vision flashed white. The chamber's runes flared, angry. The masked guard's song deepened, trying to drown her. Nyxara's eyes narrowed. Do not. Veyra gritted her teeth. I am not your key. She reached inward, past fear, past instinct, past the part of her that wanted to submit just to make the pain stop. She reached for the part that had survived the fire, the part that had snapped an amulet in a rented room and dared the entire district to smell her. The breaker. The rare wrong Omega. Veyra pressed her bleeding palm to the glowing runes on her forearm and dragged it across the pattern like an eraser. Blood smeared. The runes screamed in her nerves. She did not stop. The silver lines flickered. For a heartbeat, they dimmed. Nyxara's smile returned, slow and satisfied. Yes, fight. Give it heat. Give it life. Veyra's stomach dropped. You want me to fight? Nyxara's eyes shone with fierce certainty. A key that does not resist is brittle. I need you awake. I need you alive inside your own skin. That is the difference between opening a door and shattering a wall. Veyra's breath came fast. She realized the terrible truth. Nyxara had not been trying to avoid her resistance. She had been cultivating it. Veyra's gaze snapped to the masked guards at the circle points. Their bodies swayed with the song, eyes hidden, hands held in precise positions. Puppets. Anchors. If she broke the rune, the circle would wobble, but Nyxara might not need a perfect circle anymore. She might need a rupture. Veyra's mind raced. She had to do something Nyxara had not planned, something ugly, something desperate. The ash crescent on her neck burned suddenly, hot as a brand. The well vibrated harder. The candle flames bent inward until they nearly touched the floor. The chamber's air thickened, as if the world was holding its breath. Nyxara lifted her hands, voice rising into a chant that was not language so much as command. Veyra's runes surged bright again, overriding her attempt to dim them. Bloodlines traced the silver paths more strongly now, pulled outward toward the circle like ink toward a pen tip. Veyra cried out and dropped to her knees, palms pressed to stone. And then she did it. She took the breaker inside her and turned it on herself. Not the rune, the rule. The assumption that the key must be on her neck, that it must remain clean, that it must remain intact. Veyra dug her fingers into the glowing crescent at the base of her throat and raked her nails across it. Pain tore through her like lightning. The ash crescent flared, then sputtered. The rune pattern shivered. For one impossible second, the silver lines broke their neat geometry and scattered like startled fish. The pull toward the circle snapped. Veyra gasped and fell forward, catching herself on shaking arms, blood dripping onto the rune ring. The chamber went silent. Even the masked guard's song faltered, a skipped beat in the melody. Nyxara stared, then she laughed, not gentle, not kind, a laugh of pure relief. Good, Nyxara breathed. There you are, the breaker. Veyra lifted her head, eyes wild. The circle is broken. Nyxara stepped closer to the well, her voice softening again, almost intimate, as if sharing a secret with a lover. No, the circle is no longer necessary. Veyra's stomach turned to ice. Nyxara spread her arms like someone embracing the entire chamber. I built a lock for years because I believed the old stories. 7 points. 8th key, clean geometry, perfect moon, but the truth is simpler. Hunger does not care about symmetry. Veyra's throat closed. What are you doing? Nyxara looked at her with bright eyes. I am letting it smell you directly. The well answered. A crack split the stone rim, thin as a hairline, then another. The floor beneath the rune circle vibrated so hard Veyra's teeth clicked. The bone candles guttered, flames stretching upward as if pulled by a wind from below. Veyra scrambled backward, palms sliding on blood and sweat. The masked guards swayed, heads jerking, as if the pressure from the well tugged on whatever bound them. Whispers rose, louder now. Please no, do not open, do not. Veyra's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. The bond thread surged again, so strong she nearly vomited. Caelith was closer, not close enough, but moving. She could feel his storm pushing against walls. Nyxara turned her head, listening to something Veyra could not hear, and her smile widened with almost childlike wonder. It recognizes you, Nyxara whispered. It knows the shape of your blood, the shape of your refusal, the taste of your fear. Veyra's voice came out broken. You are going to destroy the city. Nyxara's gaze snapped to her, suddenly fierce. The city already destroys you. I am simply changing who holds the power to do it. A tremor hit the chamber, violent enough that dust fell from the ceiling. The rune circle flared, not with silver now, but with a black glow that had the sheen of oil on water. The crack in the well widened. Dark light rose from it, not illuminating the room so much as staining it. It smelled of storm and ash. Veyra's breath caught. That smell slammed into her memory like a door kicked open. The fire, smoke, a presence in the heat that had felt like a gaze. She had thought it was death watching her. What if it had been this? Nyxara's voice softened. You feel it, the first storm, the old alpha source, the hunger that predates all the neat little rules of our world, the one that never learned restraint. Veyra shook her head, trembling. Caelith has restraint. Nyxara's smile curled. Your warden, yes, iron control. Untouchable. He believes he is separate from what an alpha is. That is why he is useful. He will bring you here by trying to save you. He will offer his own throat before he offers yours. Veyra's stomach dropped. You planned him too. Nyxara's eyes gleamed. Everything is easier when you know what people worship. He worships duty, you worship survival, and the city worships anyone who promises not to look away. The dark light rose higher, pulsing in slow waves like a heartbeat. The masked guards began to shake. One fell to her knees, hands clutching her mask. A strangled sound came from beneath the mask, a human whimper. Veyra lunged toward her without thinking. Stop it, leave them alone. Nyxara's voice snapped, sharp as a whip. Do not touch my circle. Veyra froze. The guard's mask cracked down the middle with a thin, brittle sound. For a heartbeat, Veyra saw a mouth beneath, lips pale, trembling, a chin spattered with dried blood. Omega. Veyra's throat tightened. They are Omegas. Nyxara's smile returned, smooth. They are protected. They are enslaved, Veyra snarled. Nyxara stepped forward, and for the first time her scent changed in a way Veyra could not ignore. The curated softness peeled back, revealing something sharp and high and wild, like wind at altitude. Wings. Predator, not wolf, not cat, something that hunted from above. Nyxara's eyes held Veyra's. You keep using that word as if it means something to me. Veyra's hands clenched. Shadow crawled at her wrists, desperate to spill, desperate to become teeth and speed. The chamber shook again. This time, a line split across the rune's circle itself. Stone cracked. The black glow leaked through like ink through paper. Veyra scrambled backward, eyes wide. Nyxara's voice became almost reverent. There, the door is opening. Veyra's mind flashed to Caelith in chains, to the moment his pain had stabbed through her as if she wore the metal too. If the thing in the well rose, it would not just take the city. It would take the bond. It would take him. Would take everything she had managed to keep intact by force of stubbornness. The bond thread thrummed, a compass needle spinning, then fixing in a direction with brutal certainty. He was coming. Nyxara sensed it too, her gaze lifting as if she could see through stone to the surface. Her smile widened with delight. Yes, she whispered. Come, Warden, bring your storm into my cage. The floor gave a low groan. A chunk of stone near the well rim broke away and fell into darkness. There was no splash. No echo. Only a deep inhale from below, like a throat drinking air for the first time in a century. Veyra's runes flared again against her will, responding to the call. The ash crescent burned. She pressed her palm to her throat and tried to shove the heat down, tried to smother it. Nyxara's gaze snapped to her hand. Do not hide it, let it breathe. Veyra lifted her head, teeth bared. I would rather die. Nyxara's voice softened, almost kind again. You will not die, you will open. And when you do, you will finally understand what it means to be desired by something that does not pretend it is civilized. Veyra's stomach twisted. She thought of Caelith's control, the way he had stepped back with open hands instead of taking her when her claws came out. She thought of his vow in the shrine, the way he had said he did not know how to be gentle, and yet had tried anyway. Nyxara wanted something that did not try, something that consumed. Veyra forced herself upright, shaking. "If you wanted freedom for Omegas," she said, voice raw, "you would not build cages." Nyxara's eyes cooled. "Freedom is built with power, and power is built with sacrifice. You want no blood, no chains, no cost. That is a child's dream." Veyra's voice dropped into something steady, surprising even herself. "Then I will be the cost you did not calculate." Nyxara's gaze sharpened. "What?" Veyra did not answer. She closed her eyes and reached for the bond thread. Caelith. She poured one clear feeling into it, not a word, not an image, but a single direction shaped by instinct and desperation. Down, under, well. The thread pulsed hard in response, as if something on the other end had snapped to attention. Veyra opened her eyes. The black light rose higher, licking the air like flame made of shadow. The rune's circle shuddered, trying to hold shape, trying to stay a lock even as it became a mouth. Nyxara stood at the edge of the well, arms slightly out, hair stirring in a wind that did not exist above ground. The masked guards trembled at their points, some on their knees now, some clutching their heads as if the call from below was ripping their minds open. Veyra looked at them and felt a cold rage settle in her chest like iron. 7 taken, 7 bound, and she was meant to be the final hinge. The stone under her palms warmed. The runes flared once more. Somewhere above, the city held its breath, unaware that its foundations were about to open. Nyxara whispered, almost lovingly, "It is late enough." The floor cracked. A jagged line split from the well outward through the rune's circle like lightning through earth. From the gap rose a deeper darkness, thick and luminous at once, a black light that smelled of storm and ash and something ancient learning to smile. Veyra's breath hitched. The cage was opening. Veyra's breath tore as the black light climbed higher, slow and inevitable, like a tide that had finally found a crack in the shore. It did not brighten the chamber, it stained it. The candles seemed to bend toward it, as if the flames wanted to be swallowed. Nyxara stood at the well rim, hair stirring in a wind that came from below, and her face held a kind of hungry peace. Then the bond thread snapped tight so hard Veyra saw stars. Pain and fury and restraint, all braided together. Caelith. A sound hit the stone above them, distant and violent, as if the city itself had taken a fist to the mouth. Another impact, then a third. The chamber ceiling shuddered. Dust fell in a slow drift. One of the bone candles tipped and rolled, its flame clinging stubbornly to the wick. Nyxara's smile widened as if she were listening to music only she could hear. "Yes," she whispered. "Break for me." The masked guards at the circle points jerked as if pulled by invisible hooks. One of them made a sound beneath her mask, not a chant, not a song, but a choked sob. Veyra's throat tightened. She looked at their hands. Their fingers were raw where gloves had rubbed. Their wrists bore faint bruises like old bindings, not volunteers. Victims shaped into tools. The black light pulsed, and the well exhaled again, deeper, closer, like a throat learning the pleasure of air. Something moved inside it. Not a body yet. A pressure. A want. Veyra backed away, palms sliding on stone, blood tacky on her skin. She could taste storm in the air now, mixed with ash, mixed with something that felt like an alpha's attention stripped of restraint. Nyxara lifted her arms slightly, as if welcoming an embrace. "Wake," she murmured again. A crack opened along the well rim and widened, stone splitting with a wet sound that made Veyra's stomach roll. From within the gap rose a darker concentration of that black light, and for the first time Veyra felt a gaze. Not looking at the room, looking at her. The ash crescent on her neck burned, her runes flared. The gaze below seemed to smile without a mouth. Veyra's knees threatened to give. Her beast snarled, not at Nyxara, not at the guards, but at the well, at the thing that recognized her like a familiar taste. Then the chamber door slammed open, so hard it cracked the stone frame. The sound was a thunderclap. A gust of cold air knifed through the room, shredding the last of the chanting melody, and the bone candles trembled as if startled. Caelith Vorun stepped through. His wrists were still wrapped in silver chains, but they hung in broken loops, links torn apart like soft metal. Blood smeared one cuff where it had cut him. His coat was torn at the shoulder, reins slick on his hair, jaw clenched so hard it looked carved. For a heartbeat, the entire chamber seemed to hesitate, even the well, as if surprised that something dared enter its mouth without permission. Veyra's breath caught. Relief hit her so hard it hurt, and it came with a vicious second emotion she hated even more. Need. The bond thread hummed, not soothing, not gentle, but steady, a line pulling her back from the edge of panic. Caelith's gaze found her instantly. His eyes widened a fraction at the blood on her throat where she had raked the ash crescent. Then his expression went very still. Not fear, decision. Nyxara turned and her voice softened into sweetness again, as if she were greeting a friend at a polite gathering. Warden Vorun, you came exactly when I needed you. Caelith did not look at her. He moved toward Veyra, slow and deliberate, as if he were approaching a skittish animal that might bolt. The black light from the well swelled, tasting him through the air. Nyxara watched with amusement. Be careful. The old storm likes your scent. Caelith stopped between Veyra and the well, placing his body like a shield without touching her. Step back, he said, voice low. Nyxara's smile remained. Do you see how devoted he is, Veyra? He would bleed for you. He would break his own bones rather than let you fall. Veyra's voice shook. I did not ask him to. Caelith's head turned slightly, just enough for her to hear. You did not have to. The words landed in her chest like weight and warmth at once. Behind Caelith, the masked guards began to shift, uncertain. Their formation around the circle wavered as the new presence disrupted the ritual. Nyxara's eyes narrowed, a tiny crack in her calm. Kill him, she said softly to the guards. The guards twitched, then froze. Their bodies wanted to obey. Something in them pulled toward Nyxara's command like a hook in flesh. But the bond thread between Veyra and Caelith flared, and a thin sheet of light rippled outward from their proximity, not bright, more like heat shimmer, a shield. It rolled across the chamber like a wave. As it touched the nearest guard, her mask cracked with a brittle snap. She jerked back, hands flying to her face, and a strangled gasp escaped her. Another mask cracked, then another. The room filled with the sound of porcelain breaking. Veyra's heart slammed against her ribs. No, she cried. Do not hurt them, they are not your enemies. Caelith's voice was tight. I am not hurting them. He shifted his stance subtly, lowering his shoulders, loosening the threat in his posture. The shield ripple softened, becoming less of a shockwave and more of a steady field. Masks continued to fissure anyway, as if the magic binding them was brittle under truth. One guard dropped to her knees, and her mask fell away in 2 pieces. An Omega's face looked up at Veyra, eyes hollow with exhaustion, cheeks too thin. A faint bruise on her throat where a mark had been forced and then suppressed. Veyra recognized her with a sick jolt, not from close friendship, but from the shelter line, from a shared loaf broken in half, from a name called into the damp night. You, Veyra whispered, the Omega's lips trembled. I could hear you, she breathed. In the dark, we kept telling you not to open. Veyra's throat closed around a sob she refused to release. Nyxara's composure tightened into anger. Stand, she snapped at the guards. Hold the circle. But the guards were no longer a single obedient instrument. As the masks cracked, so did the obedience. Some staggered like waking from a long fever. Some clutched their heads. Some turned their faces away from Nyxara as if ashamed to look at her. A figure stepped into the chamber behind Caelith, moving with quiet urgency. Earned veil, no mask, no flourish. Coat damp, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes hard with the kind of focus that comes from holding a plan together with bare hands. Veyra's breath hitched. Erin's gaze flicked to her, apology and relief tangled in a single look. "I told you I would see details," he said. "I did not tell you I would use them." Caelith's voice cut like steel. "Now," Urund moved. He threw a metal seal toward the floor, a heavy disc etched with a symbol like an anchor and a circle. The disc hit the stone at the edge of the rune ring and rang once, a clean note that snapped the air. The rune circle flared, stuttered, then changed. The pattern did not vanish. It inverted, like a mouth closing instead of opening. The black light from the well surged upward in protest, and for a heartbeat Veyra felt the pressure below slam against the new shape, furious. The chamber shook. Nyxara's head snapped toward Urund. Her smile died. "You," she hissed. "Little Beta, you were mine." Urund's expression did not change. "I was never yours." Veyra's mind raced. Beta anchor, Tharian's warning, a third that rewrites law, so Urund had not betrayed Caelith for spite. He had played the only role that could get him close enough to sabotage the circle. A harsh laugh tore out of Veyra, half relief, half fury. "You let them chain him." Urund's jaw tightened. "If he stayed free, the crowd would have died. If you stayed with him, Nyxara would not have shown her cage. I needed her to commit. I needed her to bring you under the city where the pattern is real." Nyxara's eyes flashed with hatred. "You think you can trap an old storm with a seal?" Urund's voice went colder. "Not alone." A voice rose from the doorway, thin with strain, carrying the weight of old language. "I can," it said, "if my throat survives it." Tharian Meyerveen stepped into the candlelight, pale as paper, eyes too bright, hands shaking around a cloth-wrapped book. Veyra's skin prickled. Tharian looked at Caelith, then at Veyra, and his face twisted with guilt so naked it was almost ugly. "I helped build the first lunar laws," he said, voice hoarse. "Not this exact circle, not Nyxara's variations, but the grammar, the rules that make marks behave like chains." Caelith's whole body went still. The storm wolf in him pressed against his skin, visible in the way his shoulders rose, in the way his fingers flexed. Veyra felt it through the bond like a pulse of violence. "You," Caelith said low, "you wrote the cage." Tharian swallowed. "I thought I was sealing it. I thought I was protecting the city by giving it a law to hold the hunger down. But laws can be stolen, twisted, and Nyxara is very good at twisting." Nyxara's laugh was sharp. "Do you hear him, Veyra? The men who built the world's rules now cry about the consequences." Tharian's eyes burned. "I did not come to cry." He lifted his head toward the well, and his hands began to tremble more violently, not from fear, but from the strain of preparing to speak something that would tear him apart. "I came to reverse it." The black light surged, pressing upward as if sensing threat. Urund planted his boots and pressed his palm to the anchor seal on the floor. The disc glowed, not with beauty but with stubbornness, and the rune's circle steadied, holding shape. Nyxara's gaze snapped between them, calculating. Then she moved. Faster than a polite savior should move. Her cloak flared, and her body shifted in a blur, bones rearranging with a sickening smoothness. Feathers erupted along her arms. Her fingers lengthened into talons. Wings unfurled, dark and glossy, catching candlelight like oil. A night griffin, not a myth. A predator built for heights and darkness and sudden death. Veyra's breath caught, her beast snarling in recognition of a hunter that did not chase on the ground. Nyxara's eyes remained the same, bright and cold. "Uff," she snarled. "I will not let 3 men and a stubborn Omega steal my freedom." She lunged, not at Urund, not at Tharian, at Veyra. Talons sliced the air, reaching for Veyra's throat with ruthless precision as if the ash crescent were a handle. Caelith moved like lightning. He pivoted, stepping into the strike, and the talons raked across his chest instead of Veyra's neck. Blood sprayed onto the rune stone, dark and hot. Caelith grunted, staggered, then dropped to one knee. The bond thread screamed. Veyra tasted his blood like metal on her tongue. Pain slammed through her ribs as if the talons had hit her too. "No," she gasped, hand flying toward him. Nyxara's wings beat once, stirring the bone candle flames into wild flickers. "Yes," she hissed. "See, this is what devotion buys you, Warden." Caelith tried to rise, jaw clenched, but his breath hitched. Blood soaked his coat. The shield field wavered. The well surged. The black light swelled, thrilled by fresh storm blood spilled on its threshold. Veyra's eyes went wide. The thing below wanted that blood, wanted the taste of storm wolf, wanted Caelith's restraint cracked open. Nyxara turned her head toward the well, and her expression softened into rapture. "Drink," she whispered. The black light leaned toward Caelith like a living shadow. Veyra's body moved before her mind could. Shadow flooded her limbs, her bones shifted. Her skin rippled with darkness. She became the lynx fully, larger than she should have been, a creature made of midnight and muscle and silent rage. Her eyes burned pale in the candlelight. She planted herself between Caelith and the well and let out a low, vibrating growl that shook the dust from the ceiling. The black light paused, not afraid, but curious. Nyxara's wings flexed. "Beautiful," she breathed. "That is what you are, Veyra, not a girl, not a victim, a key and a beast." Veyra's growl deepened. The missing omegas around the circle flinched, then steadied. Some of them looked at Veyra with dawning recognition, as if they had dreamed of a shadow guardian and woken to find it real. Caelith's hand pressed into the stone as he forced himself upright, swaying. His voice came out rough, stripped of authority and command, something rower. "Veyra," her ears twitched toward him. "Dovetail your breath with mine," he said. "Not the well, not her, with me." Veyra's chest heaved. She could feel her own panic trying to sync with the hunger below, because the call wanted that, wanted her heartbeat as a drum to open the door wider. Caelith's breath was ragged but controlled, a storm refusing to become a flood. Veyra forced herself to inhale with him, one breath, then another. The bond thread tightened, not as a leash, but as a shared rhythm. Lightning and shadow braided. The shield field steadied, and this time it did not ripple outward in chaotic waves. It formed a contour, a thin outline around them that crackled faintly like air before a strike. Nyxara's eyes narrowed. "No," Urin shouted, voice strained. "Now, Tharian." Tharian lifted his chin and began to speak. The words were not beautiful, they were law. Each syllable seemed to scrape his throat. His voice tore, then held. Blood appeared at the corner of his mouth, and he kept going anyway. The rune's circle responded. The lines on the floor lit up in reverse, turning the geometry into a net. The black light from the well surged upward in rage, slamming against the netting pattern. The chamber shook so hard bone candles toppled. The missing omegas screamed, hands over ears, and the sound was heartbreak made audible. Nyxara launched herself toward Tharian, wings beating hard. Urin moved like he had been waiting for this exact moment. He fired a chain from a compact launcher at his hip. The chain tipped with a weighted hook engraved with the anchor symbol. The chain snapped around Nyxara's ankle mid-leap. Her body jerked sideways in the air. She shrieked, feathers flaring, and slammed into the rune's circle. The net pattern flared. Nyxara's wings spasmed. Her talons scrabbled on stone. She tried to rise, but the circle pulled her down like gravity had increased. She roared, voice no longer gentle, no longer curated. "Let me go." Urin's face was white with effort as he held the chain. "No." Nyxara's eyes flashed toward Veyra. "Key," she hissed. "Open." The ash crescent on Veyra's neck burned, responding to Nyxara's demand like a wound responding to salt. Veyra snarled, body trembling. The lynx wanted to pounce, to tear. But she remembered the missing omegas around the circle, remembered how easily violence could turn into more victims. She did the hardest thing. She moved toward the well, not away from it, toward the mouth that wanted her. The black light trembled, excited. Caelith reached for her, fingers brushing her shadow fur, but he did not grab. His voice was a rasp. "Veyra, do not." She turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes. In those storm-gray eyes she saw pain, fear, and something that had never been allowed to exist in a warden's face. Trust, not demand, not command. Trust offered like a hand. Veyra's throat tightened around a sound that was not a growl, not a sob, but something in between. "I am not opening it," she said, voice low, and as she spoke her shift softened enough for words to be human again. Shadow still crawled along her skin, but her hands were hands, trembling and real. "I am closing it, on my terms." Nyxara laughed through clenched teeth. "You cannot close what you are." Tharian's voice cracked as he forced out another line of the reverse law, and the net pattern tightened. The black light slammed against it again, and this time the pressure rebounded, shaking the chamber in a violent pulse. Urind shouted, "Veyra, you have seconds." Veyra stepped to the well rim and looked down. Darkness looked back with a hunger that felt intimate. It remembered her from the fire. She suddenly knew, with cold certainty, why she had survived that night. Not luck, not mercy. Interest. Her stomach turned. She lifted her bleeding palm and pressed it to the stone rim where Moon's script glowed faintly. The rim was warm as skin. The ash crescent on her neck burned hotter. The runes on her arms tried to reassemble into the key pattern. Veyra closed her eyes and reached inward to the part of her that broke marks. Not by brute force, by understanding their grammar. Tharian had called it law, so she would rewrite the clause that mattered most. The well wanted a key. She would give it a lock. Her voice came out shaking but steady enough to be heard. "You do not own my blood." The black light surged upward as if to swallow her hand. Veyra pressed harder, ignoring the pain, and spoke again, each word like a nail driven into stone. "You do not own my scent." The black light hesitated. Veyra's breath hitched. The bond thread hummed behind her, Caelith's presence a steady pressure at her back, a storm refusing to collapse. Veyra forced the next words out. "You do not own my choice." The runes under her skin flared. Then they shifted, not brightening, changing. The silver pattern that had been a key began to knot into a new shape. The crescent on her neck darkened, not into ash, but into something denser, a seal line. Tharian's voice rose, raw, finishing the reverse law as if he could feel her doing it. "The key closes what it opened," he rasped. Veyra's palm burned. Her blood soaked into the stone script and turned black for a heartbeat, then silver again, as if the mark itself were being rewritten. The black light screamed without sound. It began to pull back. Not gently, violently, like breath sucked back into lungs that did not want it. The well rim cracked again, but this time the crack did not widen. It stitched. Stone lines fused, sealing like a wound closing. The net pattern on the floor blazed, feeding the seal. The black light collapsed inward, a vortex draining itself into darkness. One last surge shot up, a desperate tendril reaching for Veyra's throat, for the ash crescent, for the taste of key. Caelith moved, swaying, and put his hand over hers on the well rim. His palm was warm and slick with blood. His breath hitched. Pain shuddered through him, and Veyra felt it through the bond like a bruise forming in her chest. But his hand was steady. He did not push. He did not take. He joined. The shield contour flared, lightning and shadow merging. The tendril hit the shield and shattered into dust, falling like black snow. The well sealed with a deep, final sound, like a door locking in the bones of the world. The rune circle dimmed. The bone candles flickered, then steadied into ordinary flame. Silence crashed down, thick and stunned. Nyxara lay in the circle, feathers trembling, wings half-folded, her face twisted with disbelief. Her griffin form shuddered. Then the magic binding her to it snapped, and she collapsed into human shape, breath ragged, eyes wide, and suddenly very mortal. "No," she whispered. "No, I was so close." Urind kept the chain taut, expression grim. "You were always close. That is what made you dangerous." Around the chamber, the missing Omegas swayed. Masks crumbled from their faces into pale dust, drifting to the floor. One by one, their eyes cleared. Confusion, fear, relief so sharp it looked like pain. Some began to cry quietly, not dramatic, not loud, just tears leaking out as if their bodies had forgotten how to hold them back. Veyra staggered away from the well rim, hand shaking, throat raw. The ash crescent on her neck no longer burned. It felt heavy, like a scar that had chosen to stay. Caelith took a step and then collapsed to his knees. Veyra caught him. His weight was too much and she nearly fell too, but she locked her arms around him and held. His breath was uneven. Blood soaked his shirt. The bond thread trembled with his weakness, and Veyra's panic surged, sharp and wild. She pressed her forehead to his temple. "Stay," she whispered. "Do not leave me with this." Caelith's voice was barely there. "Still here." Urund turned, shouting toward the tunnel. "Healers, now!" Footsteps pounded above, distant voices echoing. Tharion sank to the stone, hands shaking, blood on his lips. He laughed once, broken and stunned, then covered his mouth as if ashamed to make any sound in a room full of survivors. Nyxara lifted her head, eyes glittering with rage and grief twisted together. "I did it for Omega freedom," she rasped. "I made a world where they would not beg." Veyra's voice shook as she held Caelith tighter. "Freedom does not live in cages," she said. "Not even pretty ones." Nyxara's laugh was bitter. "You say that because you have a warden kneeling for you." Veyra's gaze snapped to her fierce. "He did not kneel for me. He bled because he chose not to let me be used. There is a difference." Nyxara's eyes flicked to Caelith, then to the missing Omegas around her, and for the first time something like uncertainty passed over her face. Then it hardened again into pride. "I will not be judged by a city that only learned to care when it was afraid." Urund's voice cut in, flat and final. "You will be judged by law, real law, not crowd law." Nyxara's lips curled. "Law is written by men." Tharion's voice, rough and exhausted, rose from the floor. "Then let it be rewritten." He looked at the missing Omegas, eyes raw with guilt. "By those it bound." He met Veyra's gaze next, and something in his expression asked without words, "Forgive me." Veyra did not forgive him. Not yet. But she nodded once, slow. Because the chamber was full of breathing people, because the well was closed, because some part of repair had begun. Healers arrived in a rush, lanterns bobbing, hands steady, faces tight with shock at the scene. They moved toward Caelith. Veyra's arms tightened around him instinctively, protective. Then she forced herself to loosen, to let hands do what hands could. A healer pressed cloth to Caelith's chest. Another murmured a stabilizing charm. Caelith's eyes opened a fraction. At Veyra, and his voice came out as a rasp. "Are you hurt?" Veyra's throat tightened. "You are bleeding and you ask me that." His mouth twitched, almost a smile, then he winced. "Answer," Veyra swallowed. "No, not badly." Caelith's eyelids lowered, relief softening the storm in him. Veyra felt something break inside her, a hard knot she had carried for years. She leaned close and whispered so only he could hear. "I felt your chains. I thought you would die before you reached me." His breath shuddered. "I would not." "You did not know that." "I did," he said, and the certainty in it was not arrogance, it was vow. Footsteps echoed again, more voices, and somewhere above, the city's distant roar began to shift into confused silence. As if Ebonreach had finally realized the scream under its foundations had stopped. Veyra lifted her head, sudden urgency cutting through the haze. "No," she said, voice sharp. "Not yet." The healers froze. Urund frowned. "Veyra." Veyra's eyes flicked to the tunnel mouth, then to the missing Omegas, then back to Caelith, pale and bloodied. "If we leave this here without a vow," she said, "someone will reopen it. Someone will find a crack. I will not live with that, not again." Urund's face tightened with understanding. "The three," Veyra nodded. "Omega key turned lock, Alpha shield, Beta anchor." Tharion pushed himself up, trembling. "And witness." The air in the chamber shifted. A soft click echoed in the stone. Veyra's skin prickled. From the shadows near the old altar, the porcelain priestess stepped forward, silent as a candle flame. Her face was the same seamless porcelain, cracked with delicate lines, eyes hollow and watching. The healers recoiled instinctively. One made a frightened sign. Urind went still, as if his rational mind was trying to file her into a category that did not exist. The priestess spoke, voice resonant. A seal of 3 requires consent. Veyra's throat tightened. We consent. The priestess turned her hollow gaze toward Caelith, who was propped slightly by a healer. Do you consent? Caelith's eyes found Veyra. His voice was weak but clear. Yes. The priestess's gaze shifted to Urind. Do you consent? Urind's jaw clenched. Yes. The priestess lifted her hands. Salt appeared on the stone floor as if sprinkled by invisible fingers, forming a small circle around the closed well rim and the anchor seal. She spoke again. Then speak your terms. Veyra's voice shook, but she did not look away. This seal closes the lunar cage without sacrifice, without chains, without hidden clauses. Caelith's voice followed, rough. This seal cannot be used to claim. It cannot be used to own. It exists to protect. Urind's voice was steady, a beta's strength made of stubborn reality. This seal binds the law to truth. If someone tries to twist it, it breaks their hand before it breaks the city. The priestess lowered her hands. The stone under the well rim warmed. A faint symbol appeared, not bright, not dramatic. 3 lines intersecting in a quiet knot. A new law. Veyra exhaled shakily. The pressure that had haunted her bones since waking with ash on her neck finally eased, like a fist unclenching. Nyxara watched from the circle, eyes narrowed, and for the first time she looked small. Guards arrived to take her, drawn by Urind's call. They approached cautiously, as if she might sprout wings again. She did not. She allowed the chains, not silver, not ritual, just iron for a criminal, and her face held contempt as she was led away. Remember, Nyxara said, voice carrying through the chamber. The city will forget these Omegas as soon as the fear fades. They always do. Veyra's voice rose, raw. Not this time. Nyxara smiled sadly. You think you can change hunger with speeches. Veyra stared at her and said the only truth that mattered. I can change what I refuse to be. Nyxara's gaze held hers for a long second, then slid away. She was taken up the stairs. The chamber slowly became a place of aftermath instead of ritual. Missing Omegas were wrapped in cloaks. Names were spoken. Hands held hands. Healers moved among them like careful birds. Caelith was lifted onto a stretcher. Veyra walked beside him, refusing to let go of his hand. His fingers squeezed hers faintly, a question. You are still here. Veyra squeezed back, answer clear. Yes. They emerged into the night above ground, and the city felt like a person waking from a nightmare with no memory of the dream, only sweat and trembling. The temple square was crowded, but not with torches now, with silence. People watched as survivors were brought out, as healers moved, as Urind stepped forward with a bundle of papers in his hand. Oris Duskwarden stood near the steps of the temple, city council cloak neat, smile polite, eyes careful. A man who looked like safety. Veyra saw him and felt the links inside her bare its teeth. Something about Oris's smile had always felt like a door that locked behind you. Urind's voice rose over the hush. Ebonreach, he said, you were told a story. Murmurs rippled. Oris's smile did not change. Investigator Vale, he called smoothly, this is not the time for theatrics. The city needs calm. Urind turned toward him. It needs truth. He lifted the papers. These are the ritual account logs, funding routes, shelter donation trails, transport receipts for suppressant and masking resin, 7 signatures. He did not name Nyxara, he named the people who had enabled her. The crowd's murmurs became anger. Oris stepped back slightly, hands raised in a calming gesture. This is absurd. Nyxara Quell is a benefactor, a savior. Urind's gaze was cold. She had a sponsor who believed she could control what was under the city. Oris's smile tightened. Urind lifted the top page. Oris Duskwarden. The square seemed to inhale as one. Oris laughed once, light and disbelieving, but his eyes darted left and right, searching for an exit. That is forgery, he said. Veyra stepped forward without thinking, her scent rising, not hidden now, not damped, and the crowd flinched at the rawness of it. She lifted her injured palm, showing the blood and the faint silver pattern now settled into a quiet seal line. "This is not forgery," she said, voice steady. "This is what your safety cost." Oris's gaze flicked to her neck. For a heartbeat, fear flashed, real fear. Then he turned and ran. The crowd surged, not at Veyra, at Oris. Omegas moved first, a wave of bodies that had learned for years to make themselves small and quiet. But tonight their eyes were bright with something new. They cut off Oris's path like a net. One Omega, face still bruised from a forced mask, stepped into his way and spoke softly, almost kindly. "Where are you going, counselor? We thought you protected us." Oris tried to shove past. Hands grabbed his sleeves, not violent, firm. He struggled, and his perfect counsel cloak tore at the shoulder. His smile was gone now. He looked like a man caught without his costume. Guards arrived, drawn by Erin's shout, and this time they did not hesitate. They took Oris into custody. The square broke into a roar, not the roar of hunger. The roar of outrage, of grief, of people realizing their fear had been used like a leash. Erin raised his voice again. "Nyxara Quell will be tried, not torn apart, not worshipped, tried." Some booed, some cheered. Some simply stared, unsure how to hold justice without violence. Veyra watched and felt something inside her settle, a new rule being born in public. Caelith's stretcher was carried toward the tower infirmary. Veyra followed, refusing to be separated. Inside the infirmary, the air smelled of herbs and clean cloth. Caelith was laid on a bed. Healers worked efficiently, stitching and binding, their faces tight with respect and fear. The warden had always been untouchable. Seeing him bleed made the world feel wrong. Veyra stood at his bedside, hands shaking, and for the first time she did not try to suppress her scent. She let it exist. The healer nearest her swallowed. "Omega," he said softly, uncertain, "your scent is spiking. It will draw attention." Veyra's eyes turned sharp. "Let it. I will not be hidden again to make the city comfortable." Caelith's eyelids fluttered. He found her with his gaze, exhausted but present. Veyra leaned closer, voice low. "Before you sleep, answer me." His brow furrowed faintly. "What?" "If I want to walk away," she said, throat tight, "will you let me?" Caelith's breath hitched, and the bond thread trembled with something like pain. Then he nodded once, slow. "Yes." Veyra's eyes burned. She swallowed the heat and forced the next words out. "Then I stay." Caelith's gaze held hers, storm gray softened by fatigue. "On your terms," he whispered. "On mine," Veyra agreed. Days passed like a fever breaking. Nyxara was held and tried, not by torchlight, not by a crowd hungry for a villain, but by testimony, records, survivors' voices, and the raw fact of what had been under the city. Erin published the evidence before it could be buried. Oris's funding routes were exposed. Shelter ledgers became chains of accountability instead of pretty lies. Tharion surrendered his private archives and accepted punishment publicly. He did not beg for forgiveness. He worked. He spent his hours helping strip binding runes from the survivors, hands shaking with exhaustion, eyes haunted. One evening, Veyra found him alone outside the infirmary, sitting on a step with his head bowed. He looked up at her, face pale. "I am sorry," he said. Veyra's voice was quiet. "Sorry does not unwrite what you wrote." "I know," Tharion whispered. "But I can help rewrite what comes next." Veyra studied him for a long moment, then she nodded once. "Then do it, and do not ever pretend your guilt is payment." Tharion flinched as if struck, then bowed his head. "Yes." When Caelith could walk again, he did not retreat into untouchable silence. He went to the square. Veyra went with him. She stood beside him without an amulet, without hiding, and the crowd's murmur rose like weather around them. Some looked at her with fear, some with awe. Some with the same hungry curiosity that had always existed, only now checked by memory of what hunger had almost unleashed. Caelith's voice carried across the square. steady despite the bandage visible beneath his collar. "I failed," he said. The crowd quieted further. A warden did not admit failure. Caelith continued. "I enforced laws that protected the city's comfort more than the city's vulnerable. I allowed secrecy to become a habit. Secrecy became a weapon in another's hands." He looked toward the survivors, the rescued Omegas wrapped in cloaks, eyes still bruised by nightmares. "I will reform the Warden Guard," Caelith said. "Old ranks are dissolved. New ranks will require consent training, scent ethics, and oversight by a council that includes Omegas and Betas. No more quiet cages labeled as shelters." A ripple ran through the crowd, disbelief mixing with cautious hope. Veyra stepped forward then, heart hammering. Her voice was clear. "Assent is not permission," she said. "An Omega is not a public resource, and protection that requires silence is not protection." Some faces hardened, some softened, but the words landed, because she stood there unhidden, alive, and the city could not pretend she was a rumor. Later, when the noise of the square faded, Veyra returned to the place of her past. The burned lot had been rebuilt, but the stones still remembered. She stood in the quiet and let the memory come. Smoke, heat. A small hand clamped over her mouth. A woman's voice, shaking, fierce. "Run." She had hated that voice for years because it had left her with loss and questions. Now she found the last truth. Her mother had not sold her. Her mother had forged the contract Nyxara had whispered about. A desperate trick to buy time, to hide Veyra behind paperwork long enough to disappear from those who hunted rare Omegas. A lie meant as a shield. Veyra's throat tightened. She knelt and pressed her palm to the stone, letting herself finally mourn without turning it into anger. When she returned, Caelith was waiting, leaning against a doorway, coat pulled tight against winter wind. He held something small in his hand, an amulet, repaired, but when he offered it, his eyes were careful, asking rather than assuming. Veyra stared at it for a long moment, then shook her head. "I am not hiding." Caelith's fingers closed around it slowly. "Then I will not ask again." Veyra's breath hitched at the quiet respect in that. "You can keep it," she said, "not to silence me, to remind you what the city used to demand." Caelith nodded once. "I will." The final seal was placed a week later, not in secret, at the temple with witnesses. Veyra, Caelith, and Urin stood at the closed well, hands joined in a circle of three, not romantic, not ceremonial, just real. Omega lock, Alpha shield, Beta anchor. The porcelain priestess watched, silent as stone. The seal formed without screaming, without blood, without sacrifice. A quiet knot in the air that settled into the well rim like a sigh. No loopholes, no hunger left reaching. Ebonreach finally had a night without sirens. On that night, Caelith asked Veyra a question with no command in it. "Where do you want to live?" he said. Veyra looked at the tower, at the city streets, at the shelter roofs that had held both kindness and cruelty. Then she looked beyond the gates, toward the line where forest began. "On the edge," she said, "close enough to return when needed, far enough to breathe." Caelith's gaze softened. "Not my tower. Not your tower," she agreed. "And not running," he said. "Not running," Veyra whispered. They found a small house where the city thinned into trees. Snow fell in clean sheets that made the world feel new. The air smelled like pine and cold water. The silence was not engineered here. It was honest. On the first morning, Veyra stood on the threshold and let her scent drift into the winter air like a flag. Caelith came up behind her, careful not to crowd, his warmth a steady presence. "You are unhidden," he murmured. Veyra's throat tightened. "I am." He hesitated, then spoke the question that mattered more than any vow witnessed by magic. "Do you still choose this?" he asked, voice low. "Me, the bond, the life." Veyra turned and looked at him, really looked. Not the warden, not the city's storm. A man who had bled for his choice and then offered hers back to her every time. Veyra reached up and touched the side of his neck, fingers lingering on the pulse there, not biting, not claiming, simply feeling life under skin. Yes, she said, I choose. Caelith exhaled shakily, and the bond thread warmed, settling into something that no longer felt like a stretched nerve. It felt like a shared horizon. That night, under a sky stitched with pale stars, they shifted, not out of violence, out of joy. Caelith became Storm Wolf, large and dark, breath steaming in the cold. Veyra became Shadow Lynx, sleek and silent, her fur swallowing moonlight. They ran together through fresh snow at the forest edge, leaving two sets of tracks that crossed, entangled, and refused to separate. And on the quiet place where neck met shoulder on both of them, the seal mark rested like a promise. Not ownership, equality. Chosen. The city behind them slept without sirens. The well under its foundations stayed closed. And for the first time, Veyra's life was not defined by what hunted her, but by what she refused to become.